Hello, good afternoon. It's been a while, but I'm here. I'm back. I'm going to do these every other Wednesday. I'm saying that out loud. I'm committing to it because I have also just launched a Patreon account. So we'll talk about that in a second, but let me say hello first. Hi, today is the first day of Aries season, so that's why I wanted to wear my red, and it's the first day of spring. So I've been kind of taking the little bit of the fall and the winter to plan and collect and heal. I was sick a lot. Oh my goodness. It was rough. I think a lot of stuff was going around this year. But now I just have this burst of energy and the vision is there that I've been formulating all winter and it's the first day of spring. So we're launching. I'm getting right into it. All right, let's get into it. So, for jumping back into today, I pulled out my research and I was like, okay, we're going to start this stuff. So, let's start this. Where do I start? And one of the first folders I opened, like I mentioned, I have stacks of research like this big because when I was in grad school, I just got so excited and working in the office, I was able to print up all this stuff and keep it. So, I opened one of the books of research and I immediately found the ISES, which is International Society for Equitation Studies. If you don't know what that is, it's been up and coming, it's bigger now, branch of studying things in the horse industry. This is where my heart is because there's not a lot of it in this country. If you go to school, if you go to college, junior college, and you're trying to study equine studies, what you're going to find is you're going to find business stuff, reproduction, nutrition. You're going to get some colt starting classes that are a little old school. And I'm sorry, this is my opinion. I've checked it out for myself. I was considering going back for a PhD and then I got spooked out of that and also it wasn't what I was looking for. What I was looking for are schools that are in the UK, I think Canada, Australia, Europe, but they're not yet here because that hasn't been our focus. We've been able to get away with what we've been taught, what we've been, the business side of things. And honestly, doing research is not great for business. I mentioned in my newsletter that got posted today, you know, announcing the Patreon and announcing how excited I was and describing how this is not the easy way for me, business wise. The easy way would be to just start telling you what to do and telling you to do it because I'm a guru and you should listen to me. Um, and this is how we have cults, right? And cults come from the term culture. You just want culture, and suddenly you're wrapped into something and you don't even know how or why. And it looks good. It's answering your questions. There is no miracle training. The miracle is to be able to decipher for yourself, to see. So doing research is not easy. It's time consuming. It's super time consuming. I got stacks of papers. I got this new book. It's the newer edition of my old one that I got to go through. And then I'm writing citations for everything because when I make a claim to do something for training, I want you guys to be able to go back and find out exactly how and why I came up with this claim based on things that you could measure yourself. So if I say, hey, you're going to give treats after your horse does X, Y, and Z, and you say, why do you think I should give treats? Now I'm going to pull out this study and I'm going to cite it so you can look it up yourself on how there were higher heart rates of horses that only use negative reinforcement and immediately recall and memory recall and lower heart rates were in this group versus the control group for horses that received positive reinforcement. I'm going to show you all that because we are in a day and age where we don't know if the information around us is true. And people have to do their own research. And I want to show you how to do that. I want to mention one thing that just, I don't want to just preach and be an activist here today, but My journey with horsemanship started in a traditional setting. There wasn't real training, there wasn't real psychology going around. We're going to get into this because I want to go over these principles with you in this podcast. But it didn't sit right. I witnessed abuse, straight up abuse, and the culture kind of accepted it because this person in authority was telling us that that's how you do it. And it just didn't feel right. It didn't sit right. It was ucky. And then I got into upgrading my philosophies. I got into natural horsemanship, and I felt like I found an answer, and I'm not trying to poo-poo on it, let's just say. But then the same thing happened where I think we're going to get into that for the Patreon. The first study we're going to get into is a little bit measuring heart rates and what might be considered unethical, but a natural horsemanship founder sold as this idea of joining up and coming together. Well, yeah, that's a separate thing, tangent I can go down right now. But I witnessed the same things, and I witnessed a lot of anthropomorphism. Now I had better results. I felt like I was doing better things, and I was on the right track. But the reason behind it was a little anthropomorphic, a little cultish. And then, lo and behold, we have whistleblowers who are leaked footage of Clinton Anderson, right? He's doing a clinic. I don't want to get too into this or too finger pointing, so you can look this up for yourself. But there's a video of him doing a clinic in an arena full of people, and there's a collapsed horse. So exhausted, so chased around and exhausted that it's collapsed. And this arena full of people is just sitting here witnessing this, not saying or doing anything. When in that situation, if you witness something like that, you need to step back and say, why are you doing this? And if the reason is just because I said so, or the horse needs to submit, well, there's a little more education that needs to go on there because it's a prey animal. There is nothing that about submission that's in a horse's ethology and like their natural behavior. That doesn't exist. So free thinking, think for yourself, think of what is right, what feels right, what looks right. And now we're going to get into what is right. We can use studies measuring cortisol levels. Cortisol's high, like this isn't the right way to do it. If there's this other way where we measure cortisol levels and they're much lower. So here we go. Let's get started. Let's get into that. That was a tangent. I'm sorry, but it's kind of the opening number, right? It's kind of the introduction of why I'm doing this and what you're going to get out of this. Okay, so I have this document. I would love to post it everywhere in every training barn, right? The first principles of horse training. And I'm going to go through this with you so I can give you guys examples. So the International Society for Equitation Science. So the society is mostly based of researchers and students. You can go on their website and join. If you are a student, you're in veterinary studies, animal behavior studies, you can get a discounted membership. But they want to promote this into the horse world, right? So they want trainers to start getting involved in using these practices. They recently had a conference in New Zealand. One day, as I become bigger with my online presence, I'm gonna go to a conference. But so far, these are the stuff that I printed off in grad school when I first got into this. Some stuff might be updated, but we have time. So I'm gonna start where my research collection starts and we'll go through the timeline. So this was printed off in, I want to say 2017, still valid. These principles are essential for optimal welfare and training efficiency. They apply to all horses, regardless of age, breed, training level, and equestrian discipline. Does your training system demonstrate each principle? All right, let's get into it. Use learning theory appropriately. Learning theory describes the process by which horses learn. your learning theory toolkit includes habituation. Okay, so the use of habituation techniques such as systematic desensitization to diminish the horse's fear reactions to environmental stimuli. Let me go through what this looks like. And this is also included in my online course that I use for clinics. We get into applied learning theory and I just lay it out for you because you have to understand these concepts and these phrases to understand how you're using it in your training. So habituation would be as simple as moving from a quiet country facility to a busy stable with a busy road. So the horses at first might not be used to, the machinery and the trucks going by, but pretty soon, because of being habituated to it, right, being used to it in their environment, suddenly, well, not suddenly, over time, they're not afraid of that anymore. They're not afraid of the sounds of the busy road. That would be an example of that. And then we got classical conditioning, the use of a neutral stimulus, voice command or light touch, to elicit responses by associating it with already learned stimulus. So, example of leg pressure to which the horse has learned to move forward. Classically conditioned cues include seat, voice, posture, and gesture. So what they're saying there is you have a vocal cue. So if I say Fez trot, normally that means nothing. If I just look at him and say Fez trot, that means nothing. But now I have trained it with the leg response. So if I don't say anything and I squeeze my leg, he's going to trot. Okay. Now, if I say the vocal command, Fez trot, and I pair it with squeezing with the leg after, consistency and good training by me, pretty soon I'm going to say Fez trot. I will not have to squeeze the leg and he's going to respond. And that's the conditioned response. Okay. That's that's an example of classical conditioning. All right. Next one we got is operant conditioning. The use of rewards and punishment. Use both positive and negative reinforcement. So important. So negative reinforcement is the removal of a stimulus because you want a behavior to continue. This is how you ride your horse. This is how horses communicate to each other. This is how most people train their horses. It's a release of pressure when you're using negative reinforcement because you're removing a stimulus. That is the reward. However, it's great to also use positive reinforcement. If you're constantly just telling your animal what they're doing wrong, they're not going to know what's right. So it's good to reward as well to let them know that they're right instead of just removing the pressure. Timing is essential. Aim to quickly reduce any pressure-based cues to light forms of pressure. Yes, timing is essential. So if I ask my horse to back up and I'm using negative reinforcement for this, so I'm taking my stick and I'm moving it at his chest, maybe I'm wiggling my rope, and he takes that initial step back. And remember, we're talking about a horse that's maybe just learning this. And I don't release. And then I release 3 seconds later. In that time between when you should have released and when you did release, the horse has probably swished his tail, blinked his eyes, so he's not going to understand exactly what you are releasing for, what behavior you're releasing. You as a human are tunnel visioned into, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is my intention. They are completely blind to it all. So you have to have impeccable timing when you're working with a horse or animal, any animal in training. And under operant conditioning, I just read the first two. There's a third one with a little X next to it. And it says, for optimal welfare, you should avoid punishment. Yes. Let me say this for the people in the back. Horses are prey animals. They don't understand punishment. Okay. The only time I may use positive punishment, which is the addition of a stimulus to stop a behavior, reinforcement is you want a behavior to continue, punishment is you want a behavior to stop, is maybe if I'm about to get bit. Okay, so if a horse is about to bite me, I might, not even plan it, just protect myself and raise an elbow. I'm adding a stimulus because you want a behavior to stop. That's the only, and I'm not intending to even punish. I'm just intending to protect myself. That is maybe the only time that would be used, right? punishment. Yeah, that's an old way of thinking. We don't need that. Okay, so when you're using negative reinforcement, you want to use a little bit of pressure, light pressure, maintain or increase the pressure, and then release. Okay. With negative reinforcement, aim to reduce pressures to light cues. The lighter you can be, the better, because then probably the more ethical you're being, the nicer you're being to your animal, and the less stress there is, and probably the less reactivity if you're being light. And then your release, as soon as the horse responds correctly, that is where the learning takes place. So if I'm riding and I want my horse to stop, I'm going to start to increase my rein pressure, start to increase it more and more and more. Second the horse stops, boom, I'm releasing. With that, they will become refined and they will start to stop from an earlier cue. So consistency and timing is going to be everything. Okay, let's move on to the next box. Take into account the horse's ethology and cognition. Horses have evolved to live and process information about the world in a certain way. So remember this, they have evolved to live and process information about the world in a certain way. Horses do not have higher thinking. They literally go through life trial and error. So if you have a horse that opens a stall gate or stall door, the horse did not have the process of thinking, okay, I got to lift the latch and push it over. It was merely just twiddling with it and then got it open. After he got it open, he learned twiddling, open door, but he was not going through the process of, having to lift and having to push it over. Okay. So this also says they need the company of other horses, locomotion, and access to roughage. So in my online course, and then if you are attending my live clinic, we go through kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the hierarchy of horse needs. So in order for horses to be healthy and happy and for learning to occur, needs need to be met. So ethology is the study of animal behavior and mostly studying them in their natural environment. They're social animals. So if a horse is living alone, not a goat, not a pony, nothing in sight, it's not likely that you're going to have good, happy learning in a healthy horse, right? They need to move. They're designed to travel 20 miles a day to find food or water. So if your horse isn't moving, you're not going to get learning across, right? Because the second you let them out in the arena, they're so pent up with energy. All they can do is run, 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 and run. And that's not a space for a horse to be able to learn. And then access to roughage. They forage 60% of their day. They have long, skinny intestines that are constantly producing hydrochloric acid. We only produce hydrochloric acid in our stomach when we eat. Horses are producing it all the time. So if they're not getting access to forage, that acid is building up. And guess what? Ulcers and colic, there's your secret formula. So understanding that and giving them the things that they need to live more naturally is going to have a horse that is easier to teach and healthier and happier, and what I believe. All right, the little X under this says, do not blame the horse for undesired behavior. Horses do not perceive nor recall events like humans do. Oh, another one to shout for the people in the back. The industry is changing, and I'm so happy about it. We still have a long way to go, but we're getting into this phase now where people are finally starting to get the masseuse out, get the chiropractor out when the horse is not behaving the way they would like it to behave. I'm not saying, there hasn't been good people going in that direction, but I think there was a lot more people who would immediately turn to behavioral issues. For example, a personal example that I'm not going to name any names or anything, but I've worked with a lot of trick riders, and there was an incident where a horse was doing something when a person was doing a certain behavior on the horse's back. And already you got to give trick riding horses a lot of credit for what they are desensitized to and allow trick riders or vaulters. You know, there's a lot of different stuff out there, and there's a lot of different stuff that I do, allowing them to do what they do. So this rider said, oh, when I do this certain move, the horse is messing with me, and it's doing this behavior every time I do this. It's messing with me. It knows. It doesn't know. It doesn't know. They don't have a developed prefrontal cortex. A horse probably barely understands why monkey-like humans like us are jumping around on their back to entertain or to teach, to get money, to pay for the things. They have no concept of all those things, but bless their hearts and the fact that they willingly accept what we do with them and to them. And it's an anthropomorphic way of thinking. Using your higher thinking abilities and projecting that onto the horse, assuming that it has similar abilities, that's where a lot of abuse can happen. Okay, so we are not to blame the horse for undesired behaviors. Instead, we are to question, is it a, spooking problem? Maybe we can use operant conditioning, classical conditioning, habituation to work through it, or is there a physical health response to something, right? Okay, moving on to the next box. Train easy to discriminate cues. Yes, 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 this is so important. Cues for each response should be clearly different. Okay, I have a horse that does a lot more. All my horses do tricks, but the one I've had the longest, Scout in particular, has lots of buttons. So on his legs alone, up here means to Spanish walk. If I press the left, he marches with the left. If I press the right, he marches with the right. And if I press down on the lower part of his leg on the left, he bows. And if I press down on the lower part of the leg, he lays down. Okay. He's got a lot of buttons, and the reason he can handle a lot of buttons is because I trained them all very separate. If I tap the left leg to bow and he lays down, sorry, that loud noise, if you're just listening to the audio, was my dog looking out the window at a squirrel, and I can see the squirrel just staring right back at her. I'm in this beautiful room that is looking out into the woods, and we call it the squillarium. So hopefully she'll be quiet, but there's a little stare down going on. Sorry. Okay, easy to discriminate cues. So if I ask him to bow, but he lays down, and I accept it and I reward it, now I'm causing confusion, okay? I tell this to students all the time. If you're speaking in the aisle amongst your horse to friends, they are getting desensitized to your voice. So if you use that same inside speaking voice, let's say I'm talking to my friend, oh yeah, I was asking him to back up and it wasn't really working, blah, 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 blah. And then you immediately turn to your horse and go, okay, back up, you should back up. I mean, how is that horse going to easily discriminate when I'm just talking to somebody in front of him versus when I'm asking him to do something? So we want to use our body language, and we want to use a different tone of voice so that it's okay. It's just a squirrel. We want to use a different tone of voice so that the horse can discriminate when we are asking something versus when we are not. Okay. This particularly relates to all rein and leg pressures and cues derived from them. Yeah, there can be a lot of cues going on when you're asking them the side pass versus when you're asking them to move forward. So you want to make sure that you're making those nice and clear. And that relates to the next box here, elicit responses one at a time. Ask for one response at a time. The horse can only be asked one thing at a time. The horse can only learn one thing at a time. Cues can be closer as responses are consolidated. Okay, so if I'm asking my horse to move forward, let's say just trot forward, and then I want a side pass, I'm going to make sure he knows how to trot forward before I start asking for, a little bit of a half pass. If you do it, we got a little X here. So simultaneous or clashing cues inhibit each other and the horse will gradually cease responding. Yes, I've seen it happen. Training should be easy. It should, oh, Billy, it should flow. It should be easy. It should be baby steps. If you're trying to do too much at once, they just kind of shut down and they don't know what you're asking. And then, you'll realize, oh, my horse was nice and responsive and light one day. And then the next day, he just kind of didn't do much and didn't respond. It's because you're asking too much. So you got to train one thing, you got to train the other. Once those two are good and solid, you can start to move them together and start to be able to ask for more. So form consistent habits. When training new responses, maintain the same cue locations, context, environment. The context and environment can be gradually altered once responses are consolidated. Again, things should be easy, baby steps. If I'm asking my horse to lay down, I'm going to go where there's nice comfy sand and it's quiet and he's comfortable. If you get into my online courses and we go through that pyramid, you know that his learning isn't going to happen until his safety and comfort needs are met. So if we're just starting to lay down and then the next day I'm like, let's go lay down in the woods, it's not going to happen. You need to make sure that they feel safe and they're comfortable out there, but also he hasn't really learned and instilled the lay down yet. So should be easy, should be baby steps. Be careful about changing that environment too much. Shape transitions so they are the same structure and the same duration each and every time. Okay. Pretty much, speaks for itself. Going on to the next box, we're getting there. Shape responses and movements. First, reinforce a basic attempt at the target behavior. Yes, I like to say reward the slightest effort. Okay. It should be easy. And if things aren't easy, you step back. Okay, so first, reinforce a basic attempt at the target behavior. If you're asking your horse to bow, first thing we got to teach them is to put their leg up. So I might tap their leg with my stick lightly, kind of being annoying, like a fly. And maybe a fly lands on their leg and they pick their leg up. They might not even be picking their leg up because I'm tapping it. I don't care. I'm going to reward it because at some point the synapses are going to go and the connection's going to be made. Okay. Then aim to improve the behavior in a step-by-step way. Okay. So once reward the slightest effort as it starts to become clearer and the responses start to become more intentional, then you can start to ask for more. Demonstrate minimum levels of arousal sufficient for training. The horse should be as calm as possible for training. Yes. Okay, so this is the other thing that I am going to be teaching heavily this year is talking about having a calm, quiet horse that is a little more on the duller side. A lot of natural horsemanship and just riding in general want a very sharp horse. But I think a sharp horse, that responds the second you pick up those reins is stressed, right? And then when they become too stressed and you get them too hot and they get too nervous and they get too flighty and they're too sensitive, you've lost it. You've stressed them out. The cortisol levels are up and they now don't possess the ability to learn because they are constantly stressed and having to respond so quickly. I have kids that trick ride on horses. I don't want to drop my whip and then pick it up and have my horse, rush out from underneath them. I want them to be not threatened. And non-threatened is relax, chill. Okay, mom dropped her whip. I'm just going to keep trotting because I know she's not just going to start hitting me. They cannot learn when they're not calm. If you have followed a lot of natural horsemanship, maybe you understand the left brain and the right brain. Right brain, nervous, gotta survive. Left brain, confident, gonna learn. First thing you got to do to teach a horse is to get them out of their right brain and into their left brain, and then the learning starts, right? Because when they're in that right brain and they're anxious, they're only focused on survival. And that goes back to our little triangle hierarchy of needs there. When certain levels of arousal are exceeding, learning and welfare suffer. When certain levels of arousal are exceeded, learning and welfare suffer. I had to say that a little differently. Yes. Learning and welfare suffer sometimes when you try to get your horse too hot, they get too hot. You can't teach them anything. They're stressed. You got to bring them down. Everything's in a balance, right? So if my horse is very hot one day and too stressed, it might just not be a good day to teach. Not every day is going to be a good day to learn. That's something we'll get into in other podcasts. But just remember that you want minimal levels of arousal. Teaching is going through the brain when you see that horse licking and chewing and yawning and the vibes are calm and quiet. That's the goal. Okay, that's where learning works. If you think learning is potentially working from a lot of arousal, it's not learning. It's responses because the horse is threatened and it has to do what it has to do in order to survive. Okay, let's keep going. We got 3 more boxes. So train persistence of responses, self-carriage. Self-carriage, woo! Shape the horse's speed, line, and posture without the need for constant cueing. Yes. So, for example, there's a lot of people that ride, and this is what I was initially taught to ride, proactive. There we go. Proactive. You want to ride and train more reactive. So if you're proactive, you're like, oh, this horse is lazy. The judge is watching. I can't let him slow down. So you're squeezing, you're spurring, you're squeezing, and the horse has no responsibility on its own, right? Versus I asked this horse to trot. I'm going to let him break to the walk, and then I'm going to cue him up again. This way, he's making a mistake and he's learning from it. And it doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to be anything of the sort. You're just not supporting him, right? Because right there, constant cueing or pressure can lead to diminished responses and stress. If you are constantly squeezing and squeezing a horse, pretty soon you're going to need bigger spurs. Same thing with the opposite. A horse that's more go. If you are not teaching them the cue and you're just constantly giving a cue of half halt, half halt, half halt, suddenly that, that snaffle doesn't work and you're going to a twist and you're going to a pelham and you have to get bigger and bigger and bigger because your cues are diminished. And now you're just using abusive tools, stuff that is very heavy, very big, it's not going to be light in the horse's mouth. It's going to cause nerve damage. That's, more stress and definitely diminish cues. So riding and training reactively, not proactively, is going to keep your cues queued up. And it's going to just promote better training and welfare. Okay. Oh, we did this one. Train only one response per signal. We didn't, but it sounds elicit responses. Sounds similar to the one we did say. So each cue should elicit a single response. Correct. If I'm tapping the top of my horse's leg, it should only mean tossing that leg out. It shouldn't also mean something else. Why would it? That's not fair. When a cue elicits multiple responses, confusion and stress may set in. Yeah, totally. Which one am I supposed to do? Well, why are you training multiple responses on one cue? Okay, you should have nice, distinct cues. Your buttons, if I'm going to go fly a plane, why should this button do 2 different things? That would be Super nerve-wracking. This button should do this, and this button should do this. Easy, clear. Remember, your horse's mental capabilities are like speaking to a 3-year-old child who doesn't speak your language. So keep that in mind. I keep that in mind all the time when I'm working with horses. If this was a 3-year-old child in front of me that didn't speak my language, how would I communicate what I'm trying to communicate? Okay. Horses can't differentiate leg and rein cues, which are used for multiple responses. That's just the little X next to the check marks, just stating what I just said. All right, avoid and dissociate flight responses. Avoid flight response behaviors at all costs. Yeah, of course. Did you know flight responses are difficult or impossible to extinguish and may reappear spontaneously? Flight responses can be related to other physical and behavioral problems. Learning can happen without trying to promote a flight response. So when horses learn, the most basic or the first encounters they have with something are the most important, because horses don't have an inner dialogue like we do. They kind of think in pictures. So they are moving through their environment, and when they meet something, they have this like catalog of their earliest memories to go through, and then therefore they can use that to determine, is this a threat or not? Should I respond and run, or is it okay? Okay, so your earliest response, your earliest reactions are your most important ones. A horse that goes on a trailer 100 times and gets into 100 times, great, no problem, gets into a trailer accident, is likely to step on that trailer again. A horse that has been on a trailer twice in its life and it has a trailer accident, from that moment going forward, you may always have a problem. You may always have a stress response. My horses are from the racetrack, off of Craigslist, Facebook, and one that was going to go to auction. They did not come directly from a rescue organization, but in my head, I rescued them from a worser fate. And they have histories that I sometimes don't know about. So Fez, the Wonder Horse, he has a thing with terps. We've done groundwork and stuff like that, but his initial responses are a little bit stressed. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know what his earliest, his 10 years of his life I missed. So he kind of always has that stress response. So if you have a young horse, especially, it's very important to not try to provoke stress responses and flight responses. That isn't how it learns. They happen. And then there's ways to make them comfortable again, to be able to work through it. And then we can always do habituation, classical conditioning, some desensitizing work, but just keep that in mind. And, it's good to study how horses actually think and learn, because a lot of it goes into their behavior and how they move around their environment. And so you can have more ethical, communications with them if you understand these things and don't hold them to too high of a standard and a mental capability. What I'm going to do, if you're looking at this is probably looking backwards in the camera. So I'm going to post the link where you guys can see this, and you can print that out for yourself and kind of run it through your own training program and the things you've done and maybe the stuff you've recorded, and you can check out this list. All right. Well, that was my podcast for today. I think it was very informative, almost like a little lesson here. So take notes, and I will see you guys in a couple weeks.